Charles Bronson, the tough guy of Hollywood, left behind more than just a bunch of great movies. He was one of the first people to work in movies. He left his family a lot of money, which made them feel a lot of different things. But what about his good luck made him cry instead of smile? It could have been the amount of money he had, how he gave it out, or the stories that were hidden in it. The people who are still here will find out the truth about Bronson's last gift to the people he loved. Charles Bronson, a coal worker from Pennsylvania, who later turned into a tough guy action star and also appeared in movies as a bad guy, made his film debut, has died. He was best known for his roles in the classic Death Wish Vengeance movies. He was 81 years old. It wasn't just that Charles Bronson was a Hollywood star, he was also known for his rough and tumble charm and strong presence in movies. Bronson had a career that ran more than 40 years and was known for his mesmerizing performances. He also became associated with the tough guy attitude. Charles Bronson was one of the most famous tough guys in movie history. His face looked like it had been cut out of a deer, and he always had his hand on the trigger of an automatic gun. As soon as he died at the age of 81, tributes began to come in. He was remembered for his brooding, macho acting, his strangely self-deprecating sense of humor, and the shocking, even offensive violence he created in his movies. Brother Lee was surrounded by his third wife, Kim, who was at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles when he died. His health had gotten a lot worse over the last few weeks after a long fight with Alzheimer's disease. He was born in Pennsylvania to a coal miner father and decided to become an actor after the war was over, for a way to get away from his sad working-class childhood. From the beginning of his work, he was set to play outcasts, gunslingers, and criminals. An Italian magazine gave him the nickname O Brutto, which means the ugly one because he wasn't very good-looking. It looked like he was doomed to play supporting parts in the future. This is The Great Escape from the Magnificent Seven, and The Dirty Dozen are the last two movies in this series. Fans, especially in Europe, were still interested in it, even though this was the case. In 1968, Alain Delon asked him to be a part of the production of a Double-Meme in France. In Once Upon a Time in the West, Sergio Leone cast him in a role that would become the most important in his career. There were times when it seemed like hours would pass without Bronson saying anything. He was such a great example of the strong and quiet type. He was once made fun of in an episode of The Simpsons that showed a town called Bronson, Missouri, where people waited menacingly at doors and only spoke words like "I'm sorry" when they broke their silence. Michael Winter said he was a very skilled actor, even though he couldn't do a lot of different roles. When asked for an honest opinion, Bronson once gave one. "At some point, I'd like to have a part where I can lean my elbow against a fireplace and drink a cocktail." Bronson's road to fame was not as smooth as those of other Hollywood stars. When he was 50, he came back to Hollywood as a star. In an interview in 1971, he talked about his ideas about why the trip had taken so long. "I might think I'm too manly because I have an idealized view of myself, or casting directors might choose people based on how they look. Some people might not think of me as their ideal." His early years didn't show any signs of the fame he would become later on. His father was a coal miner and his mother was from Lithuania, and they had 15 children. He was the 11th kid. Do not forget his name, Charles Bunchinsky. Charles learned how to stay alive in Scooptown, which was a rough area. You didn't have anything to lose in this neighborhood because you had already lost everything. The children in the Bunchinsky family lived in a small cabin and wore clothes that their bigger siblings had given them. Going to school in his sister's clothes made Charles, who was only 6 years old at the time, look bad. For Charles, it was 10 years ago that his father died. When he was 16, he went into the mines with his brothers. For every ton of coal he worked, he got paid $1. And because the pay was better, he offered for dangerous jobs. Because he behaved like other toughs in Scooptown, he was charged with assault and robbery and sent to jail. Besides World War II, he might have worked in the mines for the rest of his life rather than going to war. He was said to have been a tail gunner on a B-29 because he was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1943 and served as an Air Corpsman in the Pacific. After meeting people from other places, he swore he would never go back to the dirty conditions of Scooptown. He insisted that he wasn't interested in acting because he wanted to use his artistic skills. He was amazed at how much money movie stars could make. In addition to painting sets and having a few small parts, he joined the Philadelphia Play and Players Theater Ensemble. Bronson was able to get better at speaking while he was at the Pasadena Playhouse School. He had enough money to live on because he sold Christmas cards and gifts on the corners of different streets. In the 1951 service comedy You're in the Navy Now, which stars Gary Cooper, he was cast as a gob. When studio scouts saw him at the Playhouse, they chose to give him the part. The first movie Bronson was in as a star was Machine Gun Kelly, an exploitation film that he was in for 8 days in 1958. Many of the movies he was in like The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, The Battle of the Bulge, The Sandpiper, and The Dirty Dozen, really brought him to the public's attention. His rough, honed features and harsh personality, on the other hand, did not fit the Hollywood mold of leading men, so he never really became famous. Death Wish, his 1974 movie, was the most controversial thing he ever made. When young thieves kill his wife and rape his daughter, his whole world turns upside down. Things go wrong for Bronson, a rich liberal engineer, and his life is turned upside down. People who were sick of seeing criminals being put to death cheered, and he makes a serious promise to get rid of these pests from the city. Death Wish became one of the most popular movies of the year, even though the character's vigilantism was strongly criticized, because Bernard Gutt shot young people in a New York train car who he thought were trying to hurt him. Things got even more heated in the debate. The year 1987 was when Bronson supported the 3 more Death Wish movies he had made. From my point of view, they give people who have been victims of crime and have been waiting for the police to guard them a sense of satisfaction. There is, however, no evidence that anyone tries to repeat something like that. Like he was on TV, Bronson could be just as shy in real life as he was in interviews. Even though he was far from the Hollywood scene, he kept doing it. But even though I think I have a lot of friends, I don't actually have any. Bronson's family life gave a true picture of his unique and risky personality throughout his life. It was full of strange and interesting things that happened, just like the guy himself. Charles Bronson was just starting out in his career when he fell in love with Harriet Tendler. This person and that person were both members of the amateur theater group Plays and Players. At first, when Bronson joined the group, he liked drawing scenes and making the room look nice. What the Jewish woman, she was the daughter of a successful dairy farmer, and Bronson was a successful businesswoman. Charlie Bukinski was born and raised in Poland. He used to work in a coal mine and was a Catholic. But as time went on, he felt drawn to playing and became closer to Tendler. They went on their first date with Bronson having only 4 cents in his pocket. 2 years later, the couple got married even though Tendler's father didn't want them to. Following their plans to live their lives as a married couple, they got married in 1949 and soon after moved to California. Tendler owned things that fit in 4.5 of the 5 bags that Bronson and his family moved with. This made it hard for Bronson to bring enough things with them. While he was in California, Bronson worked hard to improve his art. These 2 people were married for 15 years before they got a divorce in 1965. They were lucky to have 2 children, Suzanne and Tony, after they got divorced. At the height of his fame, Bronson got married for the 2nd time and walked down the aisle. At first, he started seeing Jill Ireland, who was at the time married to David McCallum. She was now going to marry him. They finally got married in 1968, after some time had passed. Since his marriage to Ireland, David McCallum, who is a star on NCIS, ended, he went through some tough times. On the other hand, he didn't talk about how the split affected him until about 50 years later.